As you remember, Mr. Chairman, you worked very closely with myself and with Congressman Bishop on disaster relief a couple of months ago. Several storms hit the United States in 2018. The latest was Hurricane Michael that straddled my district and Congressman Bishop's district. I have spoken several times on this, and let me say this. I think every member of this committee has been supportive of what we've tried to do in passing a disaster bill. And this amendment is simple. It adds H.R. 268, the House passed disaster assistance bill, to your current legislation, simply adds it to the end of it. Very quickly, one of the things that has not been talked about much recently is the fact that the Air Force has used virtually all of their operations and maintenance money for the remainder of the fiscal year. And if they do not get something before we leave for the break, they are going to find themselves in dire straits. There is $750 million in this language for Puerto Rico. That is $600 million for food stamps. And in addition to that, on page 56 in the amendment, you will see the $150 million that was added in the House version of the bill. It is, with the exception of a couple of amendments, it is identical to what we passed.
And I appreciate you being here, and I certainly am sympathetic to your case here, and I know how your constituents have been impacted, and how this is important because you have raised that issue to us directly, and in the disaster relief package that we passed at the House, your priorities were reflected in that, and so I hope we can figure out a way to get this thing resolved because there are a lot of people in this country that are relying on us to get this right. So I appreciate you being here. Ms. Torres? Mr. Woodall.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Scott talks about this nonstop, fights for this nonstop. Every meeting I'm in with him, because his constituents and Sanford Bishop's constituents have put their hopes in the process working, and candidly, those hopes have been repaid with disappointment over this time under both Republican leadership and now Democratic leadership. I understand, as I know the gentleman from Georgia does, that there are waivers that would be required to make this in order, but I don't believe we'll find a man or a woman on the floor of the House that doesn't want to see families affected by typhoons, by wildfires, by volcanic activity, by hurricanes, know that the government has their back in this way. So I know it's unusual for us to offer a waiver of the magnitude that the gentleman from Georgia needs, but he's knocked on every single door on our side of the hill, on the other side of the hill, to knock on, and we're the last hope of these families that stretch from Georgia to Puerto Rico, from Florida to California, and I hope we don't let them down tonight.
Mr. Perlmutter.
Thanks for your persistence. I pass.
Mr. Raskin. Ms. Scanlon. Mr. Borelli. Ms. Shalala. Mr. DeSagne. Yeah, again, I want to associate myself with the remarks of Mr. Woodall. I mean, I think you have been steadfast in your advocacy and on this issue, and we need to resolve this one way or the other. And so I thank you for your patience. I thank you for waiting here, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your support in the prior meeting as well.
Further amendments, Mr. Woodall?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to the rule that would make an order and provide the necessary waivers to amendment number 9 to H.R. 2021 offered by Mr. Scott of Georgia. You heard his presentation. This is the only train leaving the station to provide for disaster relief from coast to coast in this country. Those folks have been waiting too long, and they deserve a vote on the House floor.
You've heard the Woodall amendment. Any discussion? I'll just say that there is a rumor the Senate may act on this this week. If it does, then we can go to conference, which is probably more efficient and direct way to be able to resolve this issue, so we can get a bill passed by both chambers into the President's desk. So I will recommend a no. All those in favor of the Woodall amendment say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. No. Being the chair, the noes have it.
Roll call.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Hastings, Mrs. Torres, Mrs. Torres, no. Mr. Perlmutter? Mr. Perlmutter, no. Mr. Raskin? Ms. Scanlon? Mr. Murley? No. Mr. Murley, no. Ms. Shalala? No. Ms. Shalala, no. Mr. Desanier? Mr. Desanier, no. Mr. Cole? Aye. Mr. Cole, aye. Mr. Woodall?
Aye.
Mr. Woodall, aye. Mr. Burgess? Mr. Burgess, aye. Mrs. Lesko? Aye. Mrs. Lesko, aye. Mr. Chairman?
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk report the total.
4 yeas, 6 nays.
Amendment is not agreed to.